What's a situation that most people won't understand until they've been in the same situation themselves? Taking care of a parent with dementia. Been there. Plus, people don't understand that when our dementia-suffering parent dies, the overwhelming emotion felt by the caregiver is not sadness, but relief. Relief that our loved one is no longer suffering, relief that the hardship of caregiving is over. The sadness already took place, we already underwent an extended grieving process, while they were still alive, as our loved one disappears bit by painful bit. Lost my grandma, a year ago, to her 15-year battle with dementia. Relief is a strange emotion to feel in that moment, but it's accurate. They didn't know where they were, who was who, what was going on, and at that point, are almost, if not completely, vegetative. They're alive, but they're not living, they're suffering. No one wants that for themselves, let alone a loved one. Having abusive parents completely skews your perception of normal. To this day, I'll relate something I thought was normal or funny, and be met with looks of horror. I was once complimented that I would make an excellent diplomat. The plain fact is that I spent my entire childhood negotiating with terrorists, so you have to build up a set of diplomatic skills very quickly. I can relate. I'm very quick to notice when someone's mood is changing for the worse, and was more often the soother, rather than the soothed. This led to developing a near-crushing sense of empathy, which made me a tasty target for folks with narcissistic traits. I got much better at tending to my boundaries, and I am currently living my best work life, as a nanny/teacher. Severe burnout, like full fugue state mental shutdown. Try describing it to some folks, and they just can't comprehend that level of chronic stress and exhaustion. Watching a movie, or taking a day off, is not going to help at that point. Still recovering myself from a pretty severe burnout in 2021. I still have days where memory is leakier than a sieve, and I have to ask the same question, and hope I write down the answer the right way multiple times an hour. It makes you feel so useless and incompetent. 90% better though, these days happen less and less frequently now. I'm at this point right now. My roommate doesn't seem to fully understand. What little rest I do get is not nearly enough. It could be worse, is something he says a lot, and yeah, it could be worse, but that doesn't help at all. I'm constantly stressed, tired, and easily agitated. I think about quitting, or jumping in front of a train, every day. I'm at a point where I feel like I'm legitimately at risk of completely collapsing at my desk, any day now. I've been actively and aggressively applying to jobs for the past few months. I'm hoping that at least puts me on the path to recovering. I'm just tired of being angry and stressed all the time, and really want to move on from this job that's been destroying my soul. Being disabled. 100%. And also being an unpaid carer. People have absolutely no clue until it happens to them. I know back pain and issues don't technically count as a disability, but oh my gosh, I did not realize how severely my life could be affected by my back going out. I helped my partner through his for months as he recovered, but I had no idea how evil it was until I got my own taste. Being his carer was also a huge eye-opener for us, and I think it truly showed him that it was okay to not be okay, and that I could help in significant ways, and that was okay too. Role reversal can be tough to break into, especially when one of you is feeling vulnerable and broken. But dang, is it ever exhausting to be a carer when life keeps going, and you still have all the other stuff to worry about. Being sick or injured and being a carer is so rough. I have so much empathy for those who do that long term. Now we're both better about helping each other when it's needed and accepting help when we need it. Those times also helped me understand invisible disabilities, and how to offer more grace for random people who don't move as fast as I think they should. I remember having to drive with my back pain at peak levels, and corners and speed bumps just about had me in tears. I try to remember all that whenever I see someone cross a street super slow, or take a corner at a crawl. But I definitely never imagined how painful it truly was, until I experienced it myself. I now have way more empathy for those who face a disability for a majority of their life. Edit: I know back issues can be a disability, folks. I just didn't want to liken back pain to folks who were born with a permanent disability, like being blind, or missing limbs, or needing a wheelchair full-time. But of course there's no doubt that when my back was out, I was out. I missed my kid's birthday 1 year. To those with permanent back issues, or even transitory, I'm not minimizing your pain either. We're all on a scale, but our scales aren't truly comparable. Wild pain for one may be the usual for another, but pain is pain, And that sucks. Gentle hugs to all. Depression. More specifically, major depressive disorder. Many people have experienced some kind of depression in their lives, but when it lasts more than 3 weeks, like 30 years, it's another level that folks can't understand. No, some kind of boot camp will not fix this. My wife, years ago, had a severe mental breakdown due to work, so major that she developed psychosis. I won't go into all of the details, but for 8 months when she completely shut down, stopped eating, talking to people, acknowledging reality, I didn't know if I would ever get her back. It took one very scary night to get her to finally accept that she needed help. It's been over 2 years from the episode, and she's back to normal now and healthy, but whenever there is a bit of depression, we make sure we sit down and talk through it. Knowing someone who was murdered. Not dead from old age, or an illness, or killed in an accident, but purposeful murder. It is horrific on every level. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. Makes a lot of issues more personal, and less generally political, especially when you add in cultural context, for the country it happens in. Especially once you realize that life is not like a TV show, and the person will never get caught or punished, and the police really don't seem to care that much. They don't care at all. I had a loved one who was murdered. They have witnesses, video footage of the vehicle, and DNA. Nothing has been done, and this is going on 3 years. I even personally found a witness who heard Milo's last words. And still, nothing. What it's like to be homeless, and how easily one can end up homeless, and how difficult it is to get back on your feet. So many of us are one bad turn of luck away from it, and I think about that a lot. I was homeless at 18. I remember that near sleep you get in your car. You never fully sleep comfortably, you're just kind of half sleeping. Scared, cold, usually hungry. I was truly blessed to have a couple angels come into my life, so I was not homeless for long, but I agree, you can't understand what it feels like. I see a lot of homeless people holding up signs near shopping centers near us. I tell my wife and kids which ones are homeless and which are not. They ask how I know. I tell them, you can see it in their eyes. Homeless have a look you can't replicate. Death of someone close to you. Yes. Grief is hard to explain. Pain is real, and physical, and overwhelming. And the only way through it is through it. You don't get over it. You don't accept it. You don't make peace with it. You learn to live with it. It may be less intense, but it never goes away. I lost both my parents to COVID. They died within 8 days of each other, after being on a ventilator for over a month. This was 3.5 years ago. You don't get over that. You learn to live with it. Poverty. My wife and I had very different upbringings. What she considers poor and what I consider poor are completely different levels of poverty. I am glad she never had to experience that growing up, but a little more understanding on why I am set in my ways on some things would be appreciated. She has explained that for her the experiences I and my siblings had is so foreign to her that she just can't understand. Yeah. My kids know nothing of this kind of life. It makes me glad, but also worried they won't be able to cope if life hits them the wrong way. Of putting off going to the grocery store because there's no money to spend. Of not bothering to ask if you can be a Girl Scout because you know your parents can't afford the uniform. Of skipping lunches rather than ask your parents for lunch money they don't have. Of eating potato soup made from skim milk and potatoes and loving every bite because you are so hungry. Of wearing the same shirt in your kindergarten and second grade school pictures because that's the one nice shirt you had. Growing up in an abusive home environment. It's in the past. Forget about it. No. It gets imprinted on your brain. My dad had serious anger issues when I was growing up, I'm sure he still does, but being able to communicate with him on an adult level and not living with him and being able to pick and choose what parts of my life he sees, definitely helps moderate his emotions. You learn the body language. You learn when they're about to explode and you can only do what you can to minimize the chances of them exploding at you. Not that listening to dad going apes hit at my brother most days was much better, to be honest. I became a people pleaser. Some people call it the fun. When I saw the signs, I become as small and quiet and invisible as possible. It definitely helped take the heat off me as a kid. Unfortunately, this is baked into me. My boyfriend is amazing, and for the most part treats me so well, but he does get stressed from work, financial worries, etc. I recognize the body language. My lizard brain just tells me, the bomb is armed and ready to blow. I become small, quiet, and invisible. I leave him well alone and let him calm down on his own. This upsets my boyfriend more. He told me that he hated how I treat him so coldly when he was in a bad place, when what he wants most in those moments is for me to hug him and hold him and tell him I love him and that I'm there for him. I've explained why I unintentionally treat him coldly, and I've promised to treat him how he needs when he's stressed. So now, I recognize the body language. Lizard brain sees that the bomb is armed, and I have no choice but to go towards the bomb, put my arms around it and kiss it. It's effing terrifying. It's against every instinct in every part of my body. I don't think this will ever feel safe or normal to me. I hate that such normal social responses will always terrify me. The strange and beautiful feeling you get when a kid, who isn't yours biologically, starts calling you mom/dad, because they've embraced the idea of you as their parent. Congratulations, and well done. That is lovely. On the other hand, being a child who was void of that parent and finally getting that parent. I didn't have a dad for a chunk of my childhood. My mom got remarried when I was about 7 or 8, and he sat me down, and we talked about how he wasn't going to force a father role onto me, but that he would really like to be my dad, if I wanted him to be. He became my dad that day, and even though he and my mom have since divorced, he's remained my father. His youngest 2 children are my little brothers, and his, now ex-fiancée, became my stepmom, and I still see her that way. Domestic abuse. While, unfortunately, common enough that there's a lot of victims to this, it's hard to explain what it's like to people who have never experienced it. It's one of those things that if it happened to you, another victim will just get it when you talk about it to them. Edit. The number of replies from people who were victims of domestic abuse is rather heartbreaking. I'm glad you guys managed to escape and heal. Especially if that abuse is also emotional and not just physical, and people don't understand how that can affect someone just as badly. I studied domestic abuse in school, and one thing I learned is that victims almost always say that the emotional abuse was worse than the physical. Panic attacks. My ex always thought I was just being overdramatic about how an unexpected panic attack effed me up for days. A few years ago, she called up to say she'd experienced one for herself, and was so sorry that she'd not been more understanding. Had my first one, when my doctor and I wanted to try a different dose of my anti-anxiety meds. Dude, like, you can't calm down, no matter what you try. My heart was pounding and I was taking fast small breaths of air for like 20 minutes. I was at work and went to a part of the building where nobody goes, and tried everything I could think of to calm down, but nothing worked. Just kind of went away on its own, but man, did I think I was gonna need to go to the hospital. Chronic pain. A few years ago I had some health issues after COVID, and developed a condition that left me in 24/7 pain for just over 18 months until surgery was, finally, able to fix it. Those 18 months were pure hell. Sure, you can think you know how mentally taxing it would be, but when it actually happens, it is worse than you can imagine. It affects every part of your life. You have to plan around it. You are constantly tired and have no desire to do anything, and just getting through the day is a struggle. I never got suicidal, but I could see how someone with chronic pain could get to that point. My quality of life was very low for over 2 years, including the COVID that hospitalized me in the first place, and I have much more sympathy and understanding now for people who deal with chronic pain. Chronic pain reduces so much. Your energy, tolerance, patience, faith, hope, will to live. Your pain scale changes. The pain that used to be a 9 to you is now a 3. It can worm its way into every conversation you have, because it affects every part of your life. You see how it exhausts everyone around you. Lots of others will eventually leave your social circle, because your and their experiences are so divergent now, you have little in common anymore. You take pills, and pills, and pills, and shots, and get a mountain of used prescription bottles, most of which are recyclable, so, do your bit. When your regular pain gets worse, you can't properly express it, because everyone around you is so numb to it. Instead, your ability to participate in activities is the indicator your friends and family use to tell you how you are doing, so if you tough it out and go to the event, the pain must not be all that bad. You legitimately consider as an option, because the idea of being trapped in this pain with no escape is mental torture. No matter what medication you take to cope, you will be judged. Opiates, you're just an addict. Over-the-counter meds, and your pain isn't that serious. herbal remedies, including cannabis, and you're a kook who is just using pain as an excuse to be lazy and experiment. Doctors immediately suspect you're wanting meds to get high. And God forbid your pain is coming from something that testing doesn't reveal. Now it's all in your head, and zapping down your arm and down your leg to your heel, but it's not real, because no tests reveal anything. So, people humor you. Are you sure you don't want to go hiking, or are you just lazy? Plus, if you're coping with your pain makes you overweight, you're a lazy slob, who deserves it. So much judgment. Because the issue isn't visible. I wish I'd lost a leg instead. Getting in a car accident. Everyone seems to think they would take time to assess the situation, react accordingly, cleverly maneuver their vehicle into a safe position, and be fine. Nope. You're driving along, and then 1,000 things happen in a split second, and you are in a crushed-up car, and it's all over, before you have a second to make your first thought. This is what scares me about drivers, bikers and pedestrians, flying through traffic, in pitch-black winter nights, totally confident they would have all the time in the world to deal with any issues. Can confirm. The 2 seconds before my accident was over, my mind completely blanked except for, holy shit, this is it. But, very thankfully, no one was hurt, despite some vehicular damage. Mine felt like a dream. As much as I've relived flying though the snow completely blind, until I hit the guardrail, I have never been able to remember the moment it started. I assume I just caught a tiny patch of ice. Being deaf. I have profound hearing loss. Barely know any ASL. The reason life is so difficult is because you learn so much by hearing conversations in group settings. This is simply not possible with bad hearing loss. I can only hear people one-on-one. It absolutely destroys your social life, and you constantly feel incompetent, even in the most mundane social situations. Edit. I know finger spelling and numbers, but that's basically it for sign language. Even if I learned it, I don't have many deaf people in my area to use it on. Getting beat up. People who've never been in a real fight, especially guys, all act like if someone came at them swinging, they would handle it. They talk about what they would do to anyone who tried to beat them up, how they would react, and they have absolutely zero understanding of the fact that the first punch can debilitate you. Jaws break so easily, and the recovery time is so long. A punch to the throat, or solar plexus, will incapacitate most people for long enough to get another hit in. Once you're on the ground, it's over, and you just have to hope the other person isn't about to kill you. They think they're going to be a hero in an action movie, because they would never just stand still waiting to get punched, like the bad guys in those movies do, and they don't understand that acting more like a real fighter than a choreographed punch victim will not save them. They have zero understanding of the fact that if the other guy has a knife, you'll be stabbed before you realize he has a knife, and you're probably going to die. They also don't really understand that if you win a fight, you're just the guy with fewer injuries. That doesn't mean you didn't get hurt, and it doesn't mean you aren't about to get arrested for assault. Even if the other guy started it. The only win in a fight is getting away without anybody getting hurt. But these people, who've never been hit in anger, act like they're going to be badass. I almost didn't comment, because this isn't a very common thing to run across. Then I realized that rationale is at the root of what makes it so difficult to relate to. Some of you have probably heard of the troubled teen industry, TTI. In a nutshell, thousands of children are sent against their will to abusive facilities because their parents believe they require behavioral adjustments. These facilities go by varied ideologies: boot camps, behavior modification facilities, wilderness therapy, drug rehab. This is just a cover. Even if you've never done drugs, they'll accept the child under the false pretense they are saving them from future behavior. However, they're all marketed to parents, who are often the root of the family's problem, as a miracle cure, which will ensure an obedient outcome. I was tricked into visiting one of these programs by my mother when I was 14. I was far from a bad kid. I was simply an unwanted leftover from a precious marriage, who was unloved and made the family scapegoat. The reason I'm responding to the thread's question is that the idea can be so foreign to some that they cannot even wrap their heads around the concept. Especially so if they've grown up in a loving environment. I was subjected to physical, mental and SA while I was held for 2 years in a warehouse located in an industrial park outside a large metropolis. One of the most evil aspects was, in order for you to advance in the program, and hopefully leave it one day, was you were expected to inflict these indignities on the other children. It not only victimizes children, it instills them with a deep shame. It also makes support group participation that much more difficult, because your fellow captives are also your abusers. I hope you'll forgive the length of this post. Ironically, the need for a long intro is at the center of what I'm wanting to communicate, though. I could literally explain what the experience was like for 2 weeks straight, and I'd probably only scratch the surface of what it's like to lose all of your rights and freedoms, to be subjected to brainwashing, tortured at the whim of the program's facilitators and other children/captives, to live in constant fear all day, every day, for years, without hope of escape. I denied it all happened, until I was in my 40s. I've learned to be very selective about who I share the topic with, because people, without meaning to, can respond in ways which can be triggering. I think this also speaks to the spirit of this thread. How can they be expected to respond if they are likely unaware of what the experience was really like, or might be completely unaware that it's even happening at all in the US today? Thank you for reading. I appreciate these moments when I get to express both the experience and also hopefully spread awareness, ultimately exposing these privatized child prisons for hire. Having a child with a never-present and incurable life-threatening illness. I'm that child, and can't handle how much and how obviously it hurts my mom. I also really can't change the situation. Added to say, I don't have a set life expectancy or anything, just an incurable disease that could become fatal if not managed closely. Same. I'm epileptic and live with my parents. Every time I seize, which thankfully isn't often, they hug me so tightly for days afterwards. They're terrified that I could get seriously injured, or even die, cause of it. Living with epilepsy is hard, but watching my parents panic every time I make a loud thump is just as hard. War. Yeah. Movies make war look exciting. Even people's war stories make it sound exciting, or at least interesting. They always leave out the thousands of hours of utter boredom, which is made substantially worse by the fact that it's not a restful boredom, it's a stressful, agitated boredom. It's interesting to me that this new brand of masculinity focuses on a lot of aspects that could be considered toxic, and follows the same trend of glorifying combat. I did 4 combat deployments during the GWAT, and I can train almost anyone to be useful in combat. Most people will be traumatized, but in the moment, they'll hold up just fine. You can't make an operator out of everyone, but you can make someone useful. When the shit's hitting the fan, and lives are in the line, it isn't hard to find someone to carry the boats, lol. It's the mind that cracks between actions that you need to watch out for, and you never really know who it'll be if I'm honest. That's why selection is so long and harsh. They have to get you as close to it as they can to see who may have the potential to crack. People fall apart in the silence between, and the time they're left with fresh images and adrenaline leaves them to the lows that follow. It's like an insidious second attack, done by shadow, you cannot see, but is every bit as deadly. It's patient too. A man I served with killed himself a month ago, and he'd been out over 10 years. I think a lot of these people looking to validate themselves just need a water confidence course. You learn a lot about a person when they're underwater, and they have to choose between the overwhelming and primal urge to get to air and letting their team down. A lot of those programs don't use it, because when done right it's an absolutely ruthless filter, with incredibly high failure rates. All that said, combat itself isn't glorious. There is glory to be had, I won't deny, but not in the way Hollywood paints it. It's also unfair. The best operator in the world could catch a stray round, or shrap, and that's it. There are no main characters. They also never discuss the overwhelming smell of shit and blood after an action. The smell of death wipes away any attempt to hold on to some notion that the glory outweighs the absolute horror. All my opinions though, and anecdotal at best. I've been wrong before, and I'll likely be wrong again. Being a parent. Lots of people without kids will talk about what they would do, or how they would approach it, but reality is, you have no clue until you have one of your own. I'm guilty of it myself, and my tune changed pretty quickly as the months went by. There's a reason the saying goes, everybody is the perfect parent until they have kids. As someone who had a child later in life, this is absolutely true. I never thought I knew everything about parenting, but I thought I knew the love you feel, because of the love I've felt towards partners, siblings, nieces/nephews, etc. But it's just different. I liked the Twilight books when I read them as a teen, don't care much for the movies. Years later, when I had a child, I suddenly was reminded of the imprinting they describe in the books. How it is not gravity holding you to the earth, but the person. It is the closest I can describe, the shift that happens, and the difference, in loving a person, and loving your own child. It is visceral,